Okay. The waited for light is geometry episode. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is clear. Today's episode, this episode specifically, is a very special one, at least for me. And I can tell you that yesterday, I managed to integrate two very important theories that throughout these years of giving these talks I've developed. And so in today's episode, I'm going to be building the bridge between the two, and I feel that have found a sort of, I feel I've found tapped into a new angle and theory of our evolution as human beings. So hopefully the audience will be patient enough to hear this through. I've made notes because there's certain important points that I have to share. Just a second, folks. Okay. Human beings, we are creatures. We are creatures that most immediately notice ourselves through light, sound, and what is visible through those. When we look back at our history, we see the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun, and we tend to consider that they had bad eyesight, both internally and externally. Nowadays, the concept of light is seen differently, and it's seen as a photon, as a particle and a wave, Light hits an object and enters your eyes as information. We can say, this is a general definition of light, that it's the smallest quantity of energy that can be transported. So if we consider that light is information and the human brain is a sort of antenna for the information that light carries. Now, it takes 8.3 minutes for a light beam from the sun to get to Earth, And when we look at a lot of natural phenomena, we see embedded within it there is geometry. Geometry is so crucial that geometry and mathematics is really what the sciences are using to explain reality. When scientists want to comprehend reality, they make complex geometrical models, They study the topology of phenomena. So even starting from the consideration of an atom, for example, it's considered that when the light beam when light engages an atom, the electron, like if you can see as an atom with circles around it, the electron moves in accordance to the light. So when the light hits an object, it becomes a higher state of that atom. The electron moves towards the higher state. And so anyways, what I'm saying is that light has an imprint, and if we are considering it as the smallest carrier mechanism, That means it's like the fastest way to take information or move information is around is light. I mean, if you just consider that this reality of ours is a vacuum, I mean, scientists are considering this. And so it's like light is this remarkable information transfer system around the cosmos. Now, the point of this episode is me explaining evolution, and first I got to share two theories that I've shared in other talks, but now I've bridged them together. One theory, I've referred to it as the on and off switch effect, but for this episode, in different moments, I can call it the geometrical light imprint theory. So you can consider this as Mr. Within's geometrical light imprint theory. Okay. That light is carrying geometry. When we look at a snowflake, if I show you a picture of a snowflake right now, here, let me show you some pictures here. Just hang on, folks. Here, I'll show you. This should be an okay picture. Yeah, this is a good picture here. So when we look at a snowflake, guys, a simple thing as a snowflake, I want you to look at the wallpaper. You see, this is the geometry in a simple snowflake that melts. Okay, so we can see that nature is no stranger to complex geometry. Man seems to be the one who's recently waking up to how everything's geometric. So you see, this is a snowflake, okay? Now, this is the geometry inside a snowflake. Now, let me see how I've written it here. Okay, yeah. So here's the thing. When excuse me, I've wondered about human psychology. And the morality of human beings, why we have this whole good and bad thing going on in the human story, you know? Aside from just reasons of that being a good action, this being bad, why is there the dichotomy? Why is there the superhero and the supervillain? Why are there two extreme positions of these, let's say, archetypal edges of the spectrum? So I wondered about this. Then I got a clue from the biological existence, and I noticed that we inhale, we exhale. You see, there's a duality to nature. And so this duality, I wondered about what is it really possibly. And when you study like how eyes evolved, it was the relationship of light going through water and hitting the creature early, very early creatures that we were under the water before we became land creatures, evolutionary speaking. So eyes actually evolved underwater when you look at it from an evolutionary biological standpoint. Now, so I'm looking at this situation and I'm like, okay, so it's like we're in the creatures on this planet are in a room, and because of the cosmological position, because of how like the astronomical position of us orbiting around the sun, and the earth also spinning around itself while it's orbiting, that means some parts of the earth, it's like the sun is always there. There was this absence, again, on and off light switch effect, cosmically imagine. Okay, so that means creatures on the surface of the earth, there was light. Yay, celebrate, party time. You know, suddenly light was off, it was darkness. It was as if there was suddenly back into the unconscious. Suddenly the conscious, suddenly the unconscious. And I'm like, we have been bombarded with this existential condition of there suddenly being everything visible and then suddenly there being dark. And imagine the creature's psychology at night when there's no light, you know? And what if think about what hopelessness is. Think about how in regards to the ethical systems, especially influenced by Abrahamic traditions, you know, when somebody does something bad, you know, even in Star Wars the guy said the guy's going to the dark side, you know. Whether it's religious sin or whatever, but I'm saying it's like the concept of the darkness was ignorance and the concept of light was clarity, you know. This is why even in the English language we say, what is it? The person brought a light to this. I don't know, something like that. You know, pretty much is the idea of like our attention is shining a flashlight of conscious awareness upon some landscape. So anyways, I concluded that our morality, our psychological morality as creatures goes back to our relationship with the light on this planet, which is one of the most ancient relationships. One thing you can totally see having an influence on the creatures on this planet. So I concluded that the human psychology, just like the inhale, exhale, just like how your heart beats, you know, you know, just like how the system of the body is awake and then sleeps. You know, this whole thing, I saw it as a relationship of light that has somehow infused in a memory habitual thing in the biological program of the creature. Now, this was my idea of light, the on and off switch effect theory, which in other terms I say geometrical light imprint. That means now in this talk, I'm here. Let me build up to it in this way. So keep into mind that on and off switch effect theory, and I've added this to this other theory, something else I had theorized. So this was my conclusion on human morality and human psychology in accordance to light, the relationship of light on this planet, the on and off switch effect theory. Keep that as one factor. Now, the other factor was this other theory I had about the potential of life. You see, when you look at evolution, I mean, even we have very notable professors on language speaking about the human creature as if language was imported some 10,000 years ago or something, you know, like at some point, not even, maybe even less than that, but I'm just saying language was imported, as if like when we look at all the other species, something unique happened. I don't know, like an alien patted us on the back, or or we suddenly, as Terence McKenna, the scholar, an ethnobotanist, suggests, he says there was a relationship, for example, with the chemical components of the plant life. So as if this animal ate a plant and it revolutionized its survival strategy in regards to natural selection and what goes on, you know. So like the creature had an advantage, something that gave this creature an advantage compared to the other ones, you know. So there is a mystery. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying this is a sort of pseudoscience. I'm just saying it's so far back, we really don't know what happened. So it's not even a sort of idea of conspiracy, but it's just an idea that there is an unknown influence upon this creature in its time, in its evolutionary development. Okay, so in regards to the chemical, so one angle is like what's happening to this complex protein structure that became this organic chemical. Now, here's the other view. So this other theory, I've called it potential intelligent particles, is this idea that if you look at the Earth, it's a development of space debris and stuff being gravitated towards the Earth. That means the planet has a gravitational pull. Stuff from around space, or random particles floating in space, are gravitating towards it, and they're being infused in the layers of the Earth. Do you know? Now, it is true that So sorry guys, just in the middle of this. So check this out, guys. This is this picture I've put in the on the wallpaper. You see, it's the way they've seen the Earth, right? So I've shared with you my sorry guys, I'm keep building because there's a sort of mathematical way I've explained this to myself. So, okay, so imagine this idea, even though the Earth is being defined like this, but I'm saying think of the Earth in a way where as it has been gravitating towards itself, particles from outer space or whatever, these particles have become part of the Earth and may potentially be in the Earth. That means light was maybe, it was light plus the potential of the cell on the Earth. Right? So it's this idea, for example, dust from one planet can get off and come to this planet, or certain things can be pulled into the atmosphere of this planet. You know, so what the idea is was I'm like, this is kind of what it feels like, where there the potential for like the seed, the potential, like an intelligent, I call it here potential intelligent particle, a potential intelligent particle gravitated to the Earth, and there's many of them that we don't know, and this is why there's so many, I feel there's so many different species, you know. So what I'm trying to say is that the potential for intelligent life was in the Earth, and the light activated it. And when we look at the geometry in this reality, seeing light as something that carries geometry. Now, I showed you the snowflake. Let me tell you something else that really inspired me to give this talk. Yesterday, my coffee cup, I was giving a talk outside, my coffee cup was on the table, and of course I've seen this a couple times before, but I had never noticed it with this context. My coffee cup was on the table and the sunlight was on it. And if you put your coffee cup on in sunlight, you see it makes a geometrical pattern. It makes a geometrical pattern. So light is a geometrical imprint. It's like a geometrical design which impacts a potential intelligent particle, and the evolution occurs. So what would that mean? So here I wrote it in this way. Right now we're thinking we are a conscious subject, okay? We are subjective consciousness. Right now, Mr.Within is speaking to you. You know, a character in one story is speaking to you as you are a character in your story, and there's one common physical story. You know, so it's like we're starting from as subjects, as if evolution evolved to a weird place where an object became to a subject to itself. Now that subject is like, what the fuck? So from a subjective point, we realize that subjective consciousness is language. What is language? Language comes from matter. We saw stuff. Okay, so our whole character, personalities, psychology, it's based on the objective phenomena, but then we see the objective phenomena is based on the light. So we've gone from the subject of self to noticing the subject of self is language, to noticing the language is coming from matter, to noticing what the matter is actually light, to noticing that light is carrying geometry. So I would say light appears to me. For me, this is just one of those ideas I'm throwing out there, you know. But I feel that imagine thousands of years, 3,000 years went by, like huge time went by, and we became, in certain scientific circles, they speak about, we became a type 2 civilization. A type 2 civilization is a civilization that can harness the power of its sun. Okay, so imagine we became a type 2 civilization, and we were like, what if we wanted to we saw like it takes too long to just overpopulate on Earth and send people to overpopulate the galaxy. Let's say we wanted to become a type 3 civilization. So we would use the sun as a dissemination tool. We would use the sun as a broadcasting machine of the geometrical pattern, that if there are potential intelligent particles out there in the cosmos, these geometrical designs evoke the life. So for me, really, what it is like light is the sculptor of the boundary of human thought. Uh, so what I'm trying to say is that we see geometry in nature. We are conscious as a part of nature. We will realize we are conscious geometry. And I feel geometry is the, like I say, language is the most important thing to study. But one thing I don't say is that geometrical language, geometrical geometry, if your mind has somehow found a way to access geometry, or anyone listening to me right now, if you have drawn geometrical shapes randomly, let me tell you, your mind is aware of the secret language of nature. That when we really zoom into nature, we see the geometry. But when we zoom out, we act as if the geometry isn't there. So geometry is light. And so, if we are creatures in light, we are creatures in the limits of the simulation of our perception is the geometrical carried information in the light beam. You know, because sometimes I've thought about light particles, and it's very complex because their influence on atoms is very subtle, right? It's very subtle. But it's as if, how is it that the light beam hits something, and it's like the light beam's like, all right, I'm going to take whatever imprint I got from this thing, and I'm going to reflect off into that person's eyes as a world. You see what I'm saying? And this is known, you know, light energizes things, you know. And also you can bring a totally temperature-based analysis of reality too, you know. You can ask someone, what do you identify with? They're like, temperature. They're like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm 37 degrees Celsius. That's it. The person, only temperature was real. So the simultaneity, the instantaneity of how the subject of thought and how the matter as light is there. You know, it's so this was the main thing I wanted to say, guys, that we are programmed here. I wrote it here. The soul here, the hands that designed. All right, guys, I'm going to read that again. The hands that designed the human design were the geometry in the light beam. That's one sentence to kind of sum up what I'm saying. The other thing I've written here is that when light is perceived as geometry, it becomes a very interesting thing, because the soul, the idea of the soul, anybody who has that idea, the idea of the soul is the additional extension or the pre-extension. That means it was there before the thing. Of the individual. That means all those people considering that there is soul beyond the body. First, you need a body to even be able to consider yourself as a soul. You know, if you were being a creature without a body, then there would be no idea or concept of a soul, you know? So I'm saying that the body is the precondition to the metaphysical animate unknown. And so what does that mean? The body, the precondition to body, to matter is light. And I'm saying light is geometrically carrying stuff, like it's carrying geometrical design, right? And so this geometrical design was like the sculptor, the hands that sculpted the human design. Here, that's a better way of saying the sentence. The hands that sculpted the human design were the geometry in the light beam. There we go. That sculpted the human design. So we are the potential. The clay was the potential intelligent particle that has. There's many. That means I wouldn't be surprised if in millions and millions of years there endlessly comes new sorts of human beings or new types of creatures. Do you know? Because these potentially intelligent particles could be there, whether we consider them as dust of another planet or just as something that is just throughout the years, it's a potential hidden in the crust, like a hidden treasure, but it's a genetical pattern or some sort of cellular design or potential for it is a cellular design, you know? So here's the thing. I said the soul is geometry behind the skin of the light beam. The soul is geometry behind the skin of the light beam, which is, I think, like my foot on the poetic gas pedal, you know, as far as it can go. That what is within light is the geometrical program. So the programmer, we can say, is the light beam. So we say light programmed the potential intelligent particle, and we are the evolutionary result. Light is geometrical information. So the soul is geometrical information before being, let us say, or let us say the soul is how geometrical information sculpts itself through form. You see, because light does have a geometrical influence. Everything in this life is geometry. Just go look at a tree. You'll be surprised. Go look at a leaf. You'll be like, oh my God, look at this geometry. So when you look at the leaf, even when you look at your hand, sometimes I've looked at leaves and I've looked at my hand and I thought, look at the hand. It's like designed like a leaf. As if the leaf is like the hand of the tree, and this tree has God knows how many hands. So you see that geometry is there. For me, it could be that the light, there was a relationship with the light, that the light could change in different levels. So that's how even discrimination occurs. So the source of duality is obviously light. But the source of the peculiar designs in that the duality expresses through. So just like how Michelangelo saw the angel in the stone and set it free, light saw the potentially intelligent particle and set the human being free. We are a geometrical authorization of emergence based on a light beam. That means light is sculpting us. So it means the sun is information. It's an information carrying system of the cosmos. So again, back to that idea I was telling you, an advanced civilization that uses the sun to broadcast the human genetical pattern all over the cosmos. So wherever the light beams hit, they also reveal the design of the human being. You know? This cosmos is incredibly surreal. You know, and scientists are wondering how to get children inspired in science. Just tell them to look at the world. You know, we paint such a safe picture that we destroy the explorers of the future. And it's a tragedy of the educational system that the student's mind is inactive when it's in the educational system. Because it has to be 50-50 of an expression reception ordeal. That means, you know what it is? The teacher should write, the teacher should perform 50%, and then the students in the classroom have to perform, they have to teach the teacher, you know? I mean, yeah. I had this incredible theory, guys, like incredible idea for the, not theory, but incredible idea for the educational system of how children in any grade in school can remember what they learn. You see, in order to remember something, you got to be able to engage in such an abstract way that it incorporates in your long-term memory. Sometimes people might wonder, like, you know, I mean, I make silly jokes sometimes, but you might not believe those silly jokes really ingrain the idea, you know? So I had this idea that children should all, after the teacher gives the lesson in the educational system, all the students, all of them, their grade is dependent on the group's behavior. So even the weak have to survive, you know? Even the strong and the weak have to work together, you know? So the idea becomes that the whole classroom has to create an incredibly fictional story that exactly makes what the teacher has taught memorable to all the students in that moment. And can you imagine a group of kids all really super paying attention to what the teacher is saying to try to translate it into, try to make it into a story, and then the teacher at the end checks it, right? And then all those kids will remember that time where they as a classroom made a story of that calculus course or whatever, you know? Or astrophysics or whatever. You see, we have to storify if we want to engage. You know, just like how the human being, the archaeologist finds something and then wipes it clean and then scans it and does all that stuff to it. You know, brushes it or something. So similarly, we engage a phenomena, we interact, and we comprehend it. You know, and comprehension could be said to be a reevaluation of all that has happened so far. So we have evolved a sort of sight, and by the way, this sight that we see, I don't know how many people know this, but like this sight is in accordance to an electromagnetic field. So we're seeing a certain frequency. Like we can't see certain things with the human eye. We can't see gamma rays, for example, which are really small waves. Or like certain radio waves or radar waves or something, which are much bigger. They say like the biggest wave is 100,000 kilometers long or something, you know? The length, wavelength, I mean, you know? So it's fascinating. Just like the sea, we have different whales and smaller fish and dolphins and sharks and lobsters and different kinds of um, let's say different kinds of fish, different sizes of fish. We also have different kinds of waves, you see? And now the only difference is we're not considering space like the ocean, you know? We're considering space as empty. That means if the idea of a vacuum is not true, it's like if science was a city, certain scientific discoveries would all collapse. For me, science is like this. All the scientists in the world should see like they're building the Tower of Babylon, but through mathematics. They're trying to reach the level of the gods. You know, that means it's as if the scientist was like, all right, man, there is no God. You know, push that God aside. Now they're like saying, if we were God, though, what would we, you know, how would the world be designed? Because us finding the true nature of reality with whatever path we choose is at the end seeing that ultimate. Because the human mind, again, when you listen to certain psychologists such as Jordan Peterson, which I would recommend to people, they listen to his lectures on hierarchies. To him, and also Terence McKenna, about his how he says culture and ideology is not your friend, because an ideology is ingrained with the design in itself, so it has a design already. So you can't believe something and also have your free will. So the moment you believe something, your free will is gone. The idea is this dictating you. So that's in regards to more of a psychological view, a view on the psychology of the human being. It's just phenomenal. It's incredibly surreal, this world we're in, and people are getting bored. Do you believe that? An advanced civilization will be in a way where the future generations can't wait to wake up. Right now, the way civilization is that people can't. How can I say it? It's honestly a navigation of attention through a complex lens, simple lens. Sometimes the lens, the environment shows you how to look at something. Sometimes you look at something and it activates, you know? You suddenly zoom in and you kind of realize, oh my God, how did Da Vinci draw the Mona Lisa? You know, and if you look at it, you see a complexity, because Da Vinci, for example, he would draw self-portraits, but he drew the wife of this duke, you know, which was Mona Lisa. So he drew Mona Lisa in the image of himself. So when you look at the Mona Lisa, that's like Da Vinci like through sculpting Mona Lisa's face out of his own face as an artist, you know. But I don't know, guys. Human beings, there's been so many different kinds of human beings. Honestly, it's like different fruit. Human beings fighting with each other, it's like how funny is it when you see an apple and an orange fight. Imagine they had little hands and they started fighting, like, you know, that's how. So guys, in this episode, this was the, I would say, this, I got through the important part. Like, I flew past the ideas I wanted to get across. Just this notion that the on and off switch effect, and the suggestion that light is a carrier of geometrical patterns that can evoke intelligence by impact. I feel sight is how that geometrical light imprint on the potential particle was the seed. It was the seed. Light beams are sculpting potential light. Light beams are sculpting seeds of intelligence on the potential particle. So what it is that I feel we are the lucky particles. Anyways, guys, this was something I felt like sharing. This episode had more of a, I don't know. I feel this explains it. I mean, just put your hand in front of it. Look at your hand. Even look at the palm of your hand right now. Just zoom in and look at the palm of your hand, and tell me, if you were a designer, how many lines do you see? How many patterns? And it's kind of like your hand is like this, again, blank piece of paper where different lines throughout time have been drawn on it, you know? So it's as if like all of nature is a complex painting, but it's a painting that is drawn by the potential that the light imbues to the particle. That means, how can we talk about anything without light? Light is existence. Now Mr. Within is saying light is also as light is existence, it arises as geometrical experience. So what does that mean? That means all this time I've been wondering about the psychology, I guess. Something that I think Carl Jung would appreciate is that Mr. Within is suggesting that our inner realms are geometrical. And if we comprehend geometry, we will comprehend the language of our minds. That means, let's say an event, let's say an image. These have a geometrical translation. That means something, just like how you can look at that tree, you can also look at that tree as just atoms. Do you know that's a geometrical translation? Now Mr. Within is saying, let's not just see it just as all of it being the same geometrical particle. Let's just see that everything can be translated into geometry. So if a snowflake has geometry, if a light beam carries geometry, if we see a geometry to our design, so technically we are geometry. Nature is geometry conscious of itself. So this consciousness now, we can say, what would the point, let's go back to that idea that a future advanced civilization, a human civilization, uses the sun as a broadcasting machine. Now what would the strategy be? We would most likely want to create a broadcasting signal through the light beam of the sun in this sci-fi futuristic setting, where the light beam upon impact causes a sophistication of antenna. So the light improves your antenna. I would say light, we can't, I don't want to say light heals you. Light aligns you, realigns you. So I think if a person actually stands in sunlight for, I don't know, like, as long as you can. Some people, like, imagine they're listening to this in the desert and they're like, hey man, I've been doing that my whole life. Set the falcon of your mind free. We are living geometry. That means if a tree was here, conscious, it'd be like, call me geometry. Sorry guys, it's just some jokes you gotta attempt. So yeah, my conclusion is that geometry is the most important thing worth studying, and it's actually the hidden treasure. And it's very crucial to even notice that there is a mathematical language. So if we consider everything to be geometry, then we create the potential of its connection. Because it's very hard. I mean, it's like, I could totally understand why the scientist is like, okay man, let's just see stuff here. Let's not see other stuff. But then when you think about, who are you? The idea of you is not stuff. The idea of you projecting in your mind in that moment is not stuff. Let's say it's the potential or inner occurrence of the stuff, inner echo of the stuff. The mystery still stands, whoever's listening. The mystery of the human psychology stands. Language has a hollowness to it, which means a lot of experiential clarification is required to all conclusions and considerations on existence, the future generations, regardless of whatever picture, meaning, or map of existence we paint for them, they're going to realize that their eyes, their experiences are the main filter that whatever the external world is happening has to go through. So you are the only one who can be aware of the geometrical language of your sight. And so the intuition would be how a mystical angle where the mystic saw this world as a dream, in the sense as a designer looks at a design and sees itself separate from the design. So I would say that the smartest thing to do is to, in that sci-fi situation, is to create a signal that makes creatures into antennas, makes particles into antennas of higher intelligence. Because it's so strange, guys. It's like there's empty space, then there's this, you know, light beams going everywhere. It's like, give me a break. So, anyways, guys, this is what I wanted to share in this episode, and I guess I'm gonna, for this episode, keep Q&A in Discord. So thanks for listening. I hope whoever you are, right after hearing this talk, now you, excuse my language, but give a shit about geometry. and and realize really that language is translation. So we can even think of this connection of the geometry in the light beam influencing the potentially intelligent particle as a script writer. So the DNA is sculpted by the light beam. In other talks, I spoke about, I just remember I spoke about that there will come a technology that will be the child of the greatest technology we have for light and the greatest technology we have for sound. It will be the child of our greatest light and sound technologies. And so for a long time, I had this sort of kind of prophecy. And so I wondered about it to such a degree that I realized it would have to be a new language. That there are certain abilities that our species has, but the language is the activation of it. So we can say, yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking how in Sanskrit they would say Sanskrit is the language of the light beings, you know, as if through various ways language has been seen as the light beam of the mind. Right now, these words are a light beam of the inner character I am. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. This was the episode, Light is Geometry episode. I'm going to share a Discord link, and Q&A can be held in Discord. Yeah. You know, can you imagine can you imagine children in the future becoming so sensitive? Imagine like a movie scene. The child comes home and the child is crying, you know, and the parents like, "What happened? Did you get bullied at school, child? What happened?" You know, the parents getting emotional. And the child is just crying, you know. It's like, "No, something hit me," you know. And then the parents like, "Oh no, this kid's getting bullied." Then the parents like, "What hit you?" And the kid's like, light hit my eyes. And the kid was crying because the light beam hit his eye. Like tears were coming in his face. You know? So people can become super sensitive in the future. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessing.